Hello and welcome to this FPL Community Shield reaction video with me, Holly Shand. In today's video I'm going to be picking out the key players that caught my eye and the ones to avoid, having watched the Community Shield. Remember, I always respond to comments, so if you've got any FPL dilemmas of your own, drop them below and I'll get back to you ahead of the Game Week 1 deadline. Make sure you're hitting the subscribe button as well. We're aiming for 20k subs for Game Week 1 and let's get this video to 250 likes. Let's get into it. Now, the Community Shield definitely felt like a pre-season game rather than a big trophy final. The pace was pretty slow in parts. It did come to life with some substitutes later in the game, but it was also the first time we saw the new Premier League rules on show. So big changes for this season. We're going to see World Cup style injury time. There's a big push on trying to keep the ball in play as much as possible. So players were getting booked for dissent, for cynical tackles and for simply kicking the ball away. Then being told to leave the ball when the other team get a free kick or a corner or throw-in or anything like that. We also saw plenty of added time. That's going to play into the hands of players that generally play 90 minutes. Now, the game finished 1-1 with a few late goals. A very late goal, actually, from that added time to give Arsenal the equaliser, and then Arsenal won on penalties. Starting off with Manchester City then, and if you're shopping for a City defender to start the season with, John Stones at 5.5 million looks like the best bet at the moment. There was talk before the game that he might have a little bit of a niggle, but he did start. He played 90 minutes as well. We saw in the most part of the game it was a flat back four for City, but when some substitutions were made later in the game, Stones did move higher up the pitch as more of a DM than a centre-back. So that's encouraging to think that he could potentially still be an out-of-position prospect for us this season. And I think clean sheet potential is going to be very high again for Man City in this campaign, particularly with those plum opening fixtures. Now, a couple of big omissions from the Manchester City 11 that started the game. Phil Foden was benched. That's going to concern around 10% of his owners ahead of Game Week 1. I think there was a little bit of an assumption this pre-season that with De Bruyne potentially still injured and with some big players departing City, Foden would see an increase in starts and minutes. I don't think that's going to come to fruition, certainly in the early phases of the season. He came on in the 58th minute and he did affect the game, but I don't think he's in Pep's full first choice lineup. We also saw some encouraging minutes for Kevin De Bruyne, who came on in the 64th minute to play his first minutes of pre-season. So it's important to see him back. Again, I don't think he's a City player I'd start with from the off, because he is recovering still from that hamstring injury. Pep Guardiola is going to have to protect him. And there's another cup final coming up for City immediately after Game Week 1, the UEFA Super Cup final. So with that in our thoughts as well, there is going to be potentially a little bit of rotation to these players that aren't fully fit in the opening phases of the season, and that could impact Jack Grealish as well. Now, Grealish was a favourite of ours in the final phases of last season. He seems to be locked in on that left wing spot for Pep right now. He was a player that was in my Game Week 1 first draft, and I am now thinking, should I be giving more weight to his capabilities? Because City have got some fantastic fixtures. Everyone's going to own Haaland, probably captain him most weeks as well. So to get an advantage when City play, you really need to be doubled or tripled up on their assets. But Guardiola's rotation makes that difficult. Grealish completed 58 minutes. I can imagine he's had quite a heavy summer after winning the treble, but I do think as a firm favourite of Pep's, he's probably the easiest attacking option to get in our squads for Game Week 1. Now, we also saw the arrival of Cole Palmer in the 64th minute. He came on, he scored. Foden did a fantastic cross ball across the pitch, a little soft header from De Bruyne, and Palmer finished, and it was an excellent finish. He's a 5 million midfielder in the game if you're interested. Now, he could get his chance this season, definitely with the departure of Mahrez. Palmer seems ready-made for that right wing for City. Obviously, they've got depth in positions, but just if you are considering as an option, do proceed with caution. His ownership is a 0.1% at the moment. He will get his big break at some point, but we've been waiting for what feels like about 5 seasons for Foden really to establish himself in City's first team. It still hasn't happened. Palmer, another academy graduate, he's going to have to bide his time. So one to keep an eye on, but certainly not to pick for game week 1. Moving on to City's forwards then, and Haaland played a decent chunk of the game. Interestingly, the commentator said that he hasn't scored in 6 games now for City, but you know, it's pre-season, it doesn't really count. If he's going on a barren spell, then pre-season is the time to do it. Hopefully when it hits against Burnley in game week 1, the Friday night fixture, he's going to absolutely fly. So, you know, do not dwell on that. Do not doubt Haaland. He's a must-have. 13% of managers don't own him. They're going to be feeling pretty silly when Haaland bags a hat-trick on Friday night and everyone else has got them captained. Their seasons will derail very, very quickly. Now, interestingly, Julian Alvarez did start the game for City. He started on the right wing, and then when Haaland went off, he moved central. He was a very bright spark in the game, and we saw towards the final phases of last season, Alvarez was consistently starting for City. So it could be a trend that continues. 6.5 million forward. Now, City have the first fixture in game week 1. They play on Friday night against Burnley. There could be some fixture leaks, so make sure that you're joining me on the deadline stream for all the news. But if there's a sniff that Alvarez starts in game week 1, we could see a sudden boost in his ownership because everyone's struggling with who to own in this second forward spot alongside Haaland. Maybe Alvarez is the answer, and even if he's only getting substitute appearances, he can absolutely deliver from the bench. So put him on your watch list and have a plan for game week 1. If we get a leak that Alvarez starts, have a draft that you're happy to go ahead with Alvarez in there, but obviously it must have a good first substitute to really make it viable in the longer term. Moving on to Arsenal then, and with the injury to Gabriel Jesus, a lot of managers looked to think that Eddie Nketiah would start the season as number 9 for Arsenal, but I think the fact he didn't start in the Community Shield is very telling. He came on for 9 minutes towards the end of the game. Now, we did see when Jesus was injured last season, Nketiah was given the opportunity to lead the line, but then about 8 game weeks in, Arteta dropped him and it was Martinelli, the false 9. And Arsenal definitely prospered in that time, Trossard on the left wing. So I think Nketiah is not going to be in this Arsenal lineup for the opening weeks of the season. So if you want Arsenal attackers, it's the midfield we need to look at. Now, there was a lot of excitement when Havertz started the Community Shield. Up top, the false 9 role, 7.5 million. However, he didn't seem very effective in that game. You know, he's come from a really poor season at Chelsea where he struggled with his finishing. That seems to be the trend that's continuing at Arsenal. But, you know, having had that poor performance, we've now got absolutely no idea how Arteta will line up for game week 1. It could be that Nketiah gets a game. It could be that Havertz remains. It could be Trossard, Martinelli. We just don't know. It's a massive headache for us now to know where to go with the Arsenal players. Havertz was kind of brought in to be the left-sided 8 in this Arsenal side. So to see him as a number 9, whereas the false 9 was a bit of a surprise because it's not. Arteta was quite clear in Havertz's position. We was expecting him to be deeper than Odegaard. So that could come to fruition. And that would really help Martinelli. If he was given the nod up front, then he'd be a lock in our teams. 8 million. He started this game on the left wing. And when he was replaced with Trossard, which is a bit of a concern. This is why I've not been that hot on Martinelli, because if he is on the wing, he is going to share minutes with Trossard. And I think Havertz starting as the false 9 means that we could see that trend continue into the start of the season. That's why I'm not interested in Martinelli at 8. I think Saka and Odegaard are absolutely worth the 0.5 million more. Saka is my favourite pick from this Arsenal midfield though. 8.5 million. He's in over 50% of teams, and I think with Jesus out, he's definitely the one to go for now. He's on penalties. There was a little bit of concern that he might be taken off penalties because he missed a spot kick in pre-season, but in that penalty shootout, he dispatched his spot kick ruthlessly. so I don't think that needs to be a concern. He was the one that set up the goal for Trossard to convert as well. Definitely the brightest spark in this Arsenal attack. Now, I'd love Trossard to be an option for the start of the season. At 7 million, he could be an absolute bargain, and I think he will produce some fantastic performances as a substitute. But until we see him in an Arsenal starting 11, I don't think we can go there. I think it's quite clear Martinelli is the top pick on the left wing, and then Trossard is going to replace him in the final phases of games. Let me know in the comments then which Man City and Arsenal players caught your eye in the Community Shield. And remember, I answer all of your comments, so any other FPL dilemmas, drop them in here. I will respond before the Game Week 1 deadline. Get this video to 250 likes and support me on my way to 20k subscribers for Game Week 1. I'll be back tomorrow with the Game Week 1 team selection, so make sure you've hit the notify button too. Thank you for watching.